wherever you are. Matt here with your weekly devotional, encouraging you to do all that you do to the glory of God. We're continuing our look at Thomas Boston's work, Am I Really a Christian?, where he asks and answers 8 common doubts a Christian might grapple with at some point in their life. This week, Boston addresses the fear of hypocrisy. He writes, "Every time I begin to think I can see the marks of grace in me and that I am truly saved, I hear about some hypocrite or apostate and I am shaken. Fear comes over me like a storm. Am I like this kind of person?" He answers, "These sorts of things ought to stir us up. We ought to examine ourselves seriously and impartially. Still, we should not always be in a state of suspense about our spiritual state. You can see the outside of a hypocrite. You can see his spiritual activity and emotions, but you cannot see inside him. You do not know his heart. You can only form a judgment of another person based on what you see on the outside. You would do well to judge others with charity. Again, you cannot know the secret springs of their actions. Rather than judging others, you ought to look at your own heart. You are the person you can judge with more clarity. You must look at yourself as no one else in the world can do. You can see things in yourself that you simply cannot see in others. A hypocrite's religion may seem far greater than the religion of a sincere believer. Remember that what is great in the eyes of men is often of little value in God's sight. I would rather groan with Paul than shed false tears with Esau, prophesy with Balaam, or have the temporary joy of the shallow ground hearers. There is a fire that will judge every man's work to see what sort it is. If God does not judge by outward appearance, why do you? Without special revelation, you cannot know the sincerity of another man's faith. But you can know the sincerity of your own faith without any special revelation. This is why Peter exhorted the saints to give diligence to make your calling and election sure. Therefore, the actions of hypocrites and apostates should not disturb you. The important thing is to seriously examine your own spiritual condition. Here are 2 ways that the weakest saints excel the best hypocrites. First, the saints deny themselves. They renounce all confidence in themselves and their works. They venture their souls completely on God's salvation through Christ. They are poor in spirit. They are blessed because they are not offended by Christ. In Philippians chapter 3, verse 3, Paul wrote, "We are the circumcision, which worship God in the Spirit and rejoice in Christ Jesus, and have no confidence in the flesh." Second, the saints have a real hatred of sin. They are willing to part with every lust, without exception, and to obey all the Lord's commands. "Then shall I not be ashamed when I have respect unto all thy commandments." Test yourselves by these standards. So let's look at some key takeaways. 1. You can't judge the heart of another, but you can examine your own. The key idea here is that you cannot see the inner motives of others. Only God can. Just as God tells Samuel concerning King Saul in 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7, "But the Lord said to Samuel, Do not look at his appearance or at the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For God sees not as man sees. For man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." But you can honestly examine your own heart. Don't let the failures or hypocrisy of others shake your confidence in Christ. Use them as reminders to look inward, not outward, and to examine yourself. You can know the roots of another person's tree, but you can check the soil and fruit of your own. 2. True believers deny themselves and trust in Christ alone. The weakest true believer is better off than the strongest hypocrite, because the saint renounces self and rests on Christ alone. Philippians chapter 3, verse 3 says, "For we are the true circumcision, who worship in the Spirit of God and glory in Christ Jesus and put no confidence in the flesh." If you know that your hope is not in your goodness, but in Jesus' righteousness, you are standing on solid ground, even if you feel weak. So ask yourself, am I relying on myself, or have I thrown myself on Christ without reserve? 3. True believers hate sin and strive to obey all God's commands. The difference between a hypocrite and a sincere believer isn't perfection, it's a heart posture. The believer desires to obey God in every area, not just outwardly or selectively. Psalm chapter 119, verses 5 through 6 says, "Oh, that my ways may be established to keep your statutes. Then I shall not be ashamed when I look upon your commandments." Do you grieve over sin and long to obey, even when it's costly? That is a sign of God's grace at work. Ask yourself, am I willing to give up every sin, not just the ones that are easy to part with? So rather than being tossed by fear when you see others fall away, let it drive you to Christ with renewed humility. Assurance doesn't come from comparing yourself to others, but from seeing Christ more clearly and clinging to him more completely. As Peter said, make your calling and election sure, and rest in God's faithfulness. Well, Lord willing, I'll see you this Sunday. God bless.